fork clatters against porcelain when Marlowe slides the folder across the table. You want to explain why my signature's on a form I never signed, Beckett? He doesn't even blink. He leans back, dabs his mouth with a napkin, and says it low enough that only she's supposed to hear, but not low enough that his mother across the table doesn't catch every word. You were supposed to be dead by now. Silence drops over that dinner table like a lid on a pot. His father's water glass stops halfway to his mouth, and Marlowe, 6 months clean of chemo, hair just starting to curl back in, just smiles because she's been waiting 4 months to hear him say exactly that on the record in front of witnesses. But to understand how she got a confession out of him at his own parents' dinner table, you have to go back to the day the diagnosis came in. Because that's the day everything with Beckett started to rot, quietly, underneath a marriage that from the outside still looked fine. Marlowe Ashgrove was 39 when the biopsy came back stage 2. She remembers the exact words the oncologist used, aggressive but treatable, and she remembers Beckett squeezing her hand in the waiting room so hard it left a mark. For about a week, he was the husband she married. He drove her to her first infusion. He held the little plastic basin when the nausea hit. He told her, "We're going to beat this together," and she believed him, because why wouldn't she? 11 years of marriage, a mortgage, a dog named Pepper that slept between them every night. That's not the kind of thing you fake. Except somewhere around week 3, the visits from a coworker named Lark started showing up in his phone a little too often. Nothing dramatic at first, a text here, a running late grabbing food with the team there. Marlowe was too busy being sick to notice much of anything. Chemo does that. It shrinks your whole world down to the size of a hospital blanket and a bucket beside the bed. It was the money that snapped her attention back first, not the texts. Their joint account had always run tight but predictable. Mortgage, groceries, Beckett's truck payment, and lately, mounting medical bills that insurance only covered part of. But 4 months into treatment, Marlowe noticed the balance dipping faster than it should. 300 here, 600 there. Small enough to explain away, but frequent enough that by the 3rd month it added up to almost $11,000 unaccounted for. She brought it up once, propped up in a recliner with an IV drip taped to the back of her hand. "Beckett, did you move money for the copay? The account's lower than I thought it'd be." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah, hospital stuff. You know how it is. I'll show you the statement later." He never did. She let it go. She had bigger things to survive than a few $100s, like her own body trying to kill her. But cancer has a strange side effect nobody warns you about. When you're staring down your own mortality for 8 hours a day hooked to a chemo bag, you start noticing things. Small inconsistencies. The way a person's voice changes when they're lying. The way Beckett had started taking his phone into the bathroom with him. The way he'd stopped saying "we" and started saying "you'll be fine," instead of "we'll through this." It was a Tuesday, 4.5 months into treatment, when Marlowe, bored, nauseous, hooked up to a bag of red liquid that made her mouth taste like pennies, logged into the bank app on her phone just to double-check a pharmacy charge. That's when she saw it. A recurring transfer. $600 a month, routed to an account under a name she didn't recognize, Lark Whitmore, memo line blank, but the routing number linked to an address Marlowe had never heard of in her life. She sat with that for a long moment, the hospital ceiling tiles swimming a little from the anti-nausea meds. Then she did what anyone with half a brain and a laptop does. She looked up the address. It was an apartment complex 20 minutes from Beckett's office. Not from their home. Not from anywhere either of them had reason to be. She scrolled through the property's website, found the leasing office number, and, because chemo brain apparently doesn't kill curiosity, she called, posing as someone interested in touring a unit like the one my friend Lark has. The leasing agent, cheerful and unsuspecting, mentioned Unit 211, said it had been leased for about 5 months now, nice long-term tenant. 5 months. That lined up almost exactly with when Marlowe's diagnosis came in. She didn't confront him that night. She didn't confront him the next week either. Instead, she started printing bank statements from the little laptop she kept on her hospital tray, highlighting every transfer in yellow, building a folder the way you'd build a case. Because somewhere between the diagnosis and that phone call to the leasing office, Marlo had stopped being a woman who trusted her husband and started being a woman gathering evidence against him. The withdrawals kept coming. Some months it was $600. One month it spiked to $2,000, memo line reading moving costs. Marlo's medical bills were piling up in a separate folder on the kitchen counter, unopened, while her husband quietly funded an apartment for a woman named Lark 20 minutes away. She started keeping a second phone, an old one she dug out of a drawer, activated with a prepaid plan, just to text herself notes from the hospital when she couldn't risk Beckett seeing her main phone light up with search results about forged signatures and insurance fraud. Because that's the other thing she found, buried in a drawer of file folders while looking for an old insurance card. Their life insurance policy, the one they'd taken out 6 years earlier, back when they were still saving for a house, $300,000 payable on death, had been amended. The beneficiary line, once reading Marlo Ashgrove's spouse, now read Lark Whitmore 60%, with Beckett's parents listed for the remaining 40%. Marlo's name wasn't on it at all anymore. She stared at that page in the recliner with the IV drip humming beside her, and something in her chest went cold and very, very still. Because a signature on that amendment form, her signature, looping and familiar, sat right there on the line, except she had never signed it. She knew her own handwriting. This wasn't it. The T's crossed too high. The loop on the Y was wrong. He'd forged it. Her husband had forged her signature on a life insurance amendment, redirecting the payout to his coworker, while she was in an infusion chair fighting to survive the thing that would have made that money payable in the first place. She didn't cry. She thought she might, sitting there, but instead she felt something harden in her that had never been there before. A very specific, very focused kind of fury that doesn't scream, doesn't shatter plates, doesn't even raise its voice. It just starts making calls. The first call was to a fraud investigator, a friend from her support group had mentioned once in passing. A woman named Odessa Marsh who specialized in financial fraud and elder abuse cases, but who, as it turned out, had handled more than a few cases of forged insurance documents in her career. Marlo called her from the hospital bathroom, door locked, voice barely above a whisper. "I think my husband forged my signature on our life insurance policy," she said. "I think he's been planning for me to die." There was a pause on the other end. Then Odessa said, calm as anything, like she'd heard this exact sentence 100 times before. "Okay, first, don't confront him. Not yet. Second, I need you to get me copies of everything. Bank statements, the policy amendment, anything with his signature and yours side by side. Can you do that without him knowing?" "I've got 4 months of statements already highlighted," Marlo said. Odessa actually laughed, short and surprised. "Then you're already ahead of 90% of my clients." Over the next 6 weeks, while Marlo kept smiling through infusions and letting Beckett think she was too sick and too tired to notice anything, she and Odessa built a file. Bank records showing the transfers to the apartment, the insurance amendment with the forged signature, which a handwriting analyst Odessa brought in confirmed, in a signed, notarized report, did not match Marlo's known signature on 4 prior documents. Screenshots of a shared calendar Beckett had forgotten she still had access to, showing recurring appointments labeled simply L, always on nights he told her he was working late. And then the biggest piece, a life insurance policy doesn't just quietly change hands. Every amendment requires the policyholder's identification to be verified, usually through a form that requires either in-person notarization or, in this case, an online e-signature portal that logs IP addresses. Odessa pulled a records request through a contact she still had at the insurance carrier, a compliance officer, not the agent handling the account, and got confirmation the amendment had been signed electronically from Beckett's registered device at 11:42 in the evening, on a night Marlo had been asleep in a hospital bed 2 towns away for a rough treatment cycle. There was no possible way she'd signed anything that night. She had the hospital admission records to prove it. "This isn't just a bad marriage anymore," Odessa told her over the phone the night they finished compiling the file. "This is insurance fraud, forgery. If he'd gone through with a claim after you passed, He could have been looking at real charges. Years, potentially. Marlowe sat with that for a second. He was betting on me dying. He was banking on it, Odessa said. Literally. The remission came 4 months into all of this, almost like a cruel joke on Beckett's timeline. Marlowe's scans came back clear on a Thursday afternoon, no evidence of disease, the oncologist's exact words, and for about 10 minutes in that office, she let herself feel something like joy again, something uncomplicated. Then she drove home and found a suitcase half-packed under the bed that wasn't hers. Beckett hadn't hidden it well. Maybe he figured she was too weak, too sick, too checked out to go digging through the closet. But there it was. A duffel bag with 3 months' worth of his clothes, a manila envelope with copies of bank documents, and a printed itinerary for 2 one-way plane tickets to a city 1,100 miles away. Not her name on the second ticket. Lark's. She zipped the bag back up exactly the way she found it and called Odessa from the driveway before she'd even gone back inside. "He's about to run," Marlowe said. "I found tickets. He's finalizing something." "Then we move faster," Odessa said. "You said there's a family dinner coming up? For your remission?" "His parents want to celebrate. Wallace and Irene are hosting." "Perfect," Odessa said. "That's your room full of witnesses. I'll have everything ready by then. Notarized copies, the handwriting report, the IP log. You just have to get the insurance company to send someone." That part, it turned out, wasn't hard at all. The compliance contact Odessa had, a mild-mannered claims investigator named Dashiell Hale, who took forged beneficiary documents about as personally as Odessa did, agreed to attend the dinner in a professional capacity at Marlowe's invitation, under the polite pretense of reviewing some policy updates in person since Mrs. Ashgrove is a valued long-term client. Beckett had no idea an actual insurance representative was about to sit down at his parents' dining table with a folder in his lap. The dinner was set for a Sunday, 6 weeks after the clear scan, at Wallace and Irene's house. A warm, cluttered place with 2 decades of family photos crowding the hallway, most of them featuring a version of Beckett that Marlowe barely recognized anymore. Irene had made a roast. Wallace had bought a bottle of wine for the occasion, proud in that quiet dad way that made Marlowe's chest ache a little, because none of what was about to happen was his fault or Irene's. Beckett showed up acting like the husband of the year. He pulled Marlowe's chair out for her. He raised a toast to beating the odds together. He even reached over at one point and squeezed her hand under the table, the exact same gesture from the waiting room all those months ago, except now it made her skin crawl instead of comfort her. Dashiell arrived halfway through the appetizers, introduced simply as a friend from the insurance company, wanted to drop off some paperwork since we're overdue for a policy review. Beckett barely looked up from his plate. He had no idea what was in the leather folder Dashiell set gently on the sideboard. Marlowe waited until the plates were cleared, until Irene had brought out the pie, until the whole table had settled into that warm, sleepy after-dinner lull. And then she reached under her chair for the folder she'd hidden there before anyone arrived. "I wanted tonight to be about celebrating," she said, and her voice was steady even though her hands weren't. "But I think it's time everyone here saw something." She slid the first document across the table, the insurance amendment with the forged signature, the beneficiary change from her name to Lark's. "Beckett changed our life insurance policy while I was in Chemo," she said. "He forged my signature to do it." Irene actually laughed, a short, nervous, disbelieving sound. "Marlowe, honey, that has to be a mistake." "It's not," Marlowe said and nodded at Dashiell. That's when Dashiell opened his folder and, calm as a man reading a weather report, laid out the handwriting analyst's report beside the amendment. "This is a certified forensic comparison," he said. "The signature on this document does not match 4 prior verified signatures on file for Mrs. Ashgrove. The amendment was also digitally submitted at 11:42 in the evening, on a date when hospital records confirm Mrs. Ashgrove was admitted for treatment 2 towns away with no access to a computer." Wallace's wine glass went down slow and careful, like he was afraid of what his hand might do if he set it down too fast. "Beckett," he said, low, "what is he talking about?" Beckett's face had gone through about 4 different colors in the last 30 seconds. This is insane. This is a misunderstanding. Marlowe's been under a lot of stress." Explain the apartment then, Marlowe said and slid the bank statements across next, the highlighted transfers glowing yellow under the dining room light. $600 a month, sometimes more, going to a unit leased under Lark's name. 5 months ago, right around when I was diagnosed. The name landed in the room like a dropped plate. Irene's fork clattered onto her pie plate untouched. "Who is Lark?" she asked, and her voice had gone very quiet. "She works with me," Beckett said too fast. That's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," Marlowe said. "You've been funding an apartment for your coworker while I couldn't afford to fill half my prescriptions, and you forged my signature to make sure that if I died, she'd get 60% of my life insurance. Your parents were only getting the leftover 40. That's the moment Wallace's face changed. Not confusion anymore, but something harder. 60% to a woman we've never met, and 40 to us? You cut your own wife out entirely? "I found the plane tickets too," Marlowe said, quieter now, almost gentle, because this part didn't need volume to land. 2 one-way tickets, yours and hers. You were finalizing the trip while I was getting my clean scan. And that's when Beckett, cornered, humiliated, watching his own parents' faces curdle in real time, snapped and said the thing that would define the rest of that night, and honestly, the rest of his life. "You were supposed to be dead by now." Nobody moved for a second. Not Irene, frozen mid-reach for her wine. Not Wallace, jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. Not Dashiell, who quietly, professionally, clicked the small recorder on the table, the one Marlowe had asked him to bring, the one that had been running since dessert. "Say that again," Marlowe said, very calm. Beckett realized what he'd just done a half-second too late, the way people always do. I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that," Marlowe said. "You've been meaning it for 6 months. Irene put a hand over her mouth. Wallace stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped, and for a second Marlowe thought he might actually take a swing at his own son, but instead he just stood there, breathing hard, staring at Beckett like he was looking at a stranger wearing his kid's face. Dashiell cleared his throat, official and steady, the way you'd imagine someone trained to diffuse exactly this kind of room. "Given the forensic evidence of forgery, the policy amendment is being flagged for fraud review effective tonight. The beneficiary change will be reversed pending investigation, and given the recorded admission just now, I'll be forwarding this file to our legal department along with local authorities. Forgery on an insurance document is a criminal matter, not just a civil one. You can't do this," Beckett said, standing now too, voice cracking somewhere between rage and panic. "Marlowe, come on, we can talk about this." "We talked plenty," Marlowe said, and she felt something settle in her chest, something that had been clenched tight for 6 months finally letting go. "You just didn't know I was listening." Irene, tears streaking down now, looked at her son like she barely recognized him. "You wanted her to die," she said, like she was still trying to make the words make sense out loud. "Your own wife." "It wasn't like that," Beckett tried again, but the room had already turned on him completely, and even he seemed to understand there was no version of "it wasn't like that" that survived a recorded confession and a forged signature laid out next to a forensic report. Wallace didn't yell. He just said, very quietly, "Get out of my house!" And something about how calm he said it made it land harder than if he'd screamed it. Beckett grabbed his jacket, looked at Marlowe one more time, maybe hoping for something, an opening, a crack, and found nothing but a woman who'd spent 4 months building a case from a hospital recliner while dying, or thinking she was dying, and had come out the other side clear-scanned and clear-headed and completely done. The fraud investigation moved fast after that. With the recorded confession, the forensic handwriting report, and the digital signature logs all pointing the same direction, the insurance company voided the amendment entirely within the month, restoring Marlowe as sole beneficiary for a policy she now fully intended to update herself, this time with her own hand and her own witnesses. The forgery charge moved through the local prosecutor's office not long after. Beckett ended up pleading down to a lesser charge, but not before the story made its way through every corner of the small world he and Marlowe used to share. His job, his parents' circle, even Lark's, once it came out that she'd known exactly what account that $600 a month was coming from. Marlo kept the house. She kept Pepper, the dog, who it turned out had never much liked Beckett anyway, if the number of shoes he'd chewed was any indication. She kept her name off any headline, mostly, except the one that mattered to her, the line on the insurance policy that now read simply and correctly, Marlo Ashgrove, policyholder, with no one else's name anywhere near it. Wallace and Irene still call her every few weeks, which she didn't expect but appreciates more than she lets on. Irene sent flowers on her 1-year remission anniversary and a card that just said, "We're proud of you, we're sorry for him." Marlo keeps that card in the same drawer where she used to keep her old forged insurance amendment, right next to the folder Ota helped her build, the one that saved her more than money ever could. If you were Marlo, would you have waited for the dinner or confronted him the second you found those bank statements? Let me know in the comments, and if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe because this channel's just getting started.